Today we will be speaking about Jane Eyre. The standard for today is the knowledge constructor. Students critically curate a variety of resources using digital tools to construct knowledge, produce creative artifacts, and make meaningful learning experiences for themselves and others. Students plan and employ effective research strategies to locate information and other resources for their intellectual or creative pursuits. Students evaluate the accuracy, perspective, credibility, and relevance of information, media, data, or other resources. Students curate information from digital resources using a variety of tools and methods to create collections of artifacts that demonstrate meaningful connections or conclusions. Students build knowledge and actively exploring real-world issues and problems, developing ideas and theories, and pursuing answers and solutions. Jane Eyre is categorized as a romance novel as well as a Victorian era. The Victorian era was from around 1837 to 1901. It is when many artistic styles and literary schools, as well as social, political, and religious movements flourished, and at the time of prosperity, broad imperial expansion, and great political reform. Jane Eyre was written by Charlotte Bronte. It was published in 1847, and the original language was English. The novel is categorized as a romance novel. So the book Jane Eyre was written by Charlotte Bronte, who was born on 1816 and died on 1855. Much of Jane's story came from Charlotte Bronte's own history, along with her sisters Emily and Anne. Charlotte endured horrifying boarding school, and when you read Jane Eyre, you'll also notice that much of this history is just like the book. So you'll also notice that Jane Eyre was immediately successful when it was sold. But Charlotte worked as a teacher who is her aunt. She's very cruel to Jane, and she's petty. She doesn't like Jane. She's very unforgiving. Another character that appears in Jane's childhood is Helen Burns. She was Jane's childhood friend, and they became friends during Jane's time at the boarding school. Helen is a very kind, spirited person. She's very innocent. He is associated as Rochester's foil. He's restrained, pious, and cold. He basically is the person that Jane flees to after everything unravels at Thornfield Manor. Mr. Rochester is Jane's love interest. He's very impulsive, and he's very broad. He says what he thinks, and he is one of those characters that is in the first class during the Victorian. Adele is the foster daughter of Mr. Rochester, but she's also the student of Jane while she is at Thornfield Manor. She's very playful, she's a foreign student, and she's materialistic. Towards the end of the book, we find out that while Jane and Mr. Rochester try to get married, that Mr. Rochester actually has a wife named Bertha Mason. Bertha is very beautiful, however, she was repressed by the plague. So she ends up locked away. There are a couple of manners in the book that are very good to discuss when you discuss Jane Eyre. The first one is Gateshead. This is the manor / house that Jane was orphaned in and tormented by her aunt and her cousins. This is where she finds solace in reading, which basically means Jane finds a safe haven in her reading. She really comes to terms with what is going on, and she just basically finds peace in reading. Second one would be Thornfield Manor. This is where Jane starts her governess job for Mr. Rochester. She agrees later in the book to marry him, but however on their wedding day, it is revealed that Bertha is Mr. Rochester's wife and she is still alive. And then Jane flees later on. The next manor to be discussed is Marsh End. Marsh End is where Jane is taken in by St. John Rivers and his sisters. But she finds she cannot marry St. John. He is not her type. He's cold and aesthetic. Ferndean is the manor in which Jane returns to Rochester and she finds him blinded from a fire that Bertha set. And in the end, Jane and Rochester marry at this manor, and this is the manor in which they live. Passion. Passion is one of the themes in Jane Eyre that is very relevant. Passion is relevant in two characters of the book. The characters are Jane and Bertha. It is represented as a theme through Bertha because it is intensified through her imprisonment, and it leaves her unable to express any emotion. Through Jane, it shows her a bit plain, however fully intellectual, moral, and physically passionate. Gender and class. Jane's actions and choices could be argued as controversial during the time this was written. She questions authority a lot. She's very rebellious. She has a bit of rebelliousness to her. And she does what she wants. However, in a class-like society, that's not how things are supposed to go. Religion and self-control. Jane sees different types of piety in Helen and St. John. She draws her own moral code to avoid temptations and make choices in which she feels that are wrong. She decides that whatever is right to her is right, and that she's going to do what feels right for herself.